All right. Happy New Year, everybody. We are still waiting for some of our friends to join us, but I think we're going to get started here because we have so much to talk about. And I am so excited to have Tricia Montalvo Timm here with us, author of Embrace the Power of You. I am Debi Yadegari. I am the founder and CEO of Villyge. For those of you who may not be familiar with Villyge, Villyge is an HR tech platform. It is a manager enablement platform that helps managers to guide and support their employees through life events. Those things that are personal, but that also affect productivity and teams. So many life experiences really form our own identities, becoming a parent, becoming a caregiver, becoming a spouse, coming true to our sexual identity, coming true to our gender. All of that really goes to the topic that we're going to be talking about today, where we at Villyge are really focused on creating psychological safety within the workplace and also opening lines of communication so employees can share with their managers what's going on in the background and to help managers and leadership understand why and how they are showing up as they are, which is why I am so excited to have Tricia here. Tricia is a corporate executive, board director, thought leader, and author of the new book coming out soon, Embrace the Power of You, which we are going to dig into. She is a first-generation Latina who rose through the ranks of Silicon Valley, advising high-tech companies, big and small, very big, culminating in the sale of data analytics data analytics software company, Looker, to Google for $2.6 billion. So this Latina definitely has a seat at the table. She is one of the few Latinas who have attained the triple achievement of reaching the C-suite, joining the boardroom, and cracking the venture capital ceiling. Her career has spanned from working with some of the largest publicly traded multinational companies in the world to stepping in as the first leader to help build and scale several high growth startups. Tricia currently serves on the board of Salsify, a top SaaS software company whose commerce experience management platform helps brands, manufacturers, distributors, and retailers collaborate to win on the digital shelf. Her industry recognitions include the 2020 Women of Influence in Latino Business Leadership Awards from Silicon Valley Business Journal and the title of Diversity Champion from the Silicon Valley Business Journal Corporate Council Awards. She's also a huge advocate for women and girls, serving as a mentor, advisor, investor in female-funded companies. And with her new book, Embrace the Power of You, Owning Your Identity at Work, she hopes to inspire more people to embrace their true selves, their own heritage, and achieve more success and fulfillment in their work. Her book will be released in March. We'll talk about that a little bit soon. But first, I just want to dive in. The very beginning of your book, you said, "My mom is from El Salvador. My dad is from Ecuador. I am Latina." And you go on to how that was how you started one of your LinkedIn posts, and you really stewed upon that moment about whether or not you wanted to press send. Can you share a little bit with us about that moment?
Yes, and thank you, Debbie, for having me on this webinar today. I'm so excited to have this conversation. That moment was really hard for me. I had downplayed my Latina heritage for most of my career. Really, I never saw anyone that looked like me in the room. I was in corporate high tech, in enterprise software, and it's male dominated. And so for me, it felt very scary because I didn't want to alienate. I felt like I was in the club and I didn't want to get out of the club. And it felt very scary and vulnerable to start talking about my heritage. But on the flip side, I had already sort of unpacked some of this, doing some work myself. I realized that the fact that I never saw anyone that looked like me meant that I needed to be that person, the person I wanted to see when I was going up through the ranks that I never saw. So I had a responsibility to be visible. And so those were the things that I was grappling with as I hit send. And it was just an incredible response from there.
Yeah, one of the things that you said was that you had fears that the Latino
Yeah.
community that you were hoping to serve would reject you for not having been an advocate sooner.
Yeah.
What was the response from the Latina community when you finally said, I'm here?
Yeah, I had a lot of fear. Because I felt like a fraud. I felt like I didn't advocate, for the people that I represent, and I was very scared. But the response was overwhelming. I kept getting these messages of, "I'm a Latina, also. Thank you for showing up," and my mother also is from Ecuador or El Salvador, and I've never seen someone in leadership that is from the same country as my parents. Thank you for sharing. And it's just this moment where other Latinas in tech, in the corporate world, felt seen, because they had never seen someone like them in positions of leadership. So it really gave me a boost of, okay, this actually matters. I need to do more with this.
Yeah, one of the things that you said, and also in the beginning of the book, is that your hope for the readers is that by reading this book, and for leaders, that they will be able to foster a newfound empathy for those in the organization who desperately want to contribute but are afraid to bring their full selves to work. So I love how in your book, at the end of every chapter, you have a section for managers on called manager strategies, and how to really put your suggestions and your experience into play. Talk to me a little bit about how you've seen organizations change throughout your career. Part of what you talked about in the beginning is that diversity became the cool thing, and you didn't want to be seen as, putting your Latina heritage on the line in order to be cool, but really you were looking to make a change. So clearly we've seen, huge shifts within the corporate realm. And then, later on in the book, you also talk about and warn companies not to showcase, the diversity in their company either, by putting, those within their organization on display. So it's a fine line that organizations are walking these days. And I think they're trying to find their footing. Talk to me a little bit about what you've seen and where you think things are going and where you hope things will end up.
Yeah, when I wrote the book, it really was for the reader and help them along this journey. But then I realized that there's so much power in storytelling. And if the book can be used within organizations to work within companies and leadership, employee resource groups, to start having the conversation, I wanted it to be a tool. And so a leader can use the book and have those manager strategies through the stories of my own story and stories of other executives. It starts to create empathy for people that are unlike you. And I think through empathy is when you start realizing, oh, I didn't realize how hard it might be for somebody. I talk a lot about being a working mother, and there's so many times where my male colleagues say, I never even realized what you had to go through to raise your kids at work and show up at work. And so it starts creating empathy. And so the manager strategies then, through each chapter in the book, try to say, okay, this is where the reader is on their journey. What can you do as a manager to help them to create an environment that allows them the permission to show up as their authentic selves? And so, for example, one strategy I use is, or I talk about is, if you have a program that is increasing diversity at your company, you're going to have diverse thought coming in. And the worst thing you could do is bring someone in because of the diverse thought that they're bringing, and then say, why can't you just get along with, why can't you just, get along with everybody else and say, go along with everyone else's opinions? They're going to bring diverse thought. And so you need to welcome diverse thought. And in conversations or in meetings, you can proactively say, who has a different opinion here, rather than waiting for the person to have to proactively kind of come in and give their different thoughts. So I think, I think managers and leaders want to make a change. And the hope is that this is a tool to help them along that process.
Yeah, I love that. And I highlighted at where you put, expect different opinions. And I feel like so much that you wrote in the book was coming from the Latina and the mother perspective, but it was just great practice because there are different personalities, different styles. There's people that, speak up naturally. There's people that are more shy. And saying something like, does anybody have, putting it out there, does anybody have, a different viewpoint, it's a way to open conversations up without having to point someone out and say, what do you think? And it allows the space for people to show up and to offer an alternative viewpoint. I loved that. And, I just want to say again to everybody in the audience, I'm a huge fan of this book. Everybody who knows me and follows me knows that I am all over this space. And this is what Villyge believes in, the power of empathic leadership. And while we have a technological tool that organizations can use to help deliver guidance to managers just in time, this book allows leaders just to dive in. And it's an amazing read with some amazing stories and experiences that really drive home the point that you were trying to make, that when we understand employees' backgrounds and plights and where they come from, we can show up different as leaders. And you also, mentioned how you bring a lot of your motherhood into it. There was one story that you put here. I have to read this. Just it made my heart, it made my heart drop. You said, as my dude, pardon me, I'm too excited here about this. As my due date crept closer and closer, I couldn't hide my emerging belly. I dreaded the day I had to tell my boss I was pregnant. I knew he would not take it well. I wish I could tell you that things went swimmingly, that he was overjoyed at my pregnancy and the fact that I was about to embark on one of the most amazing chapters of my life, being a new mom. At first, his reaction was dead silence. My heart felt like it was beating outside of my chest as I anticipated what he would say. Then he asked, "How could you do this to me?" And then you go on about how he went on to say, "I've seen this movie. I know how it ends."
Yeah.
I think that while not everybody has that exact gameplay, there are so many working mothers who can relate. And I have a similar story, and that was the muse for why I started Villyge. But that was a very powerful story. And I think it's also powerful for leaders who are not parents or maybe haven't been there to understand how terrifying it can be for employees to share, what you said, what should be a happy moment in their life with their leader. And what we always say at Villyge is what happens back here 100% affects how people show up here. And that can also be a great thing. But for leaders to see it as a negative thing, tell me about that moment. And writing that was just, it was very powerful.
Yeah, that moment was very difficult. I was very scared. I knew he would not take it well. I had kind of became his right-hand person. Really, he leaned on me for everything. And I knew just in the environment and conversations that sort of old school. And so my heart dropped. I felt, when you said, "How could you do this to me?" I felt guilty. Like, how could I do this to him? I'm abandoning him. I really felt bad. And, I think those experiences, while they were so hard, really led to how I showed up as a female leader, 15 years later. When I was at Looker, I remember seeing a woman who was pregnant, and I thought, I don't want this woman to go through what I went through. How do we support her as she goes through this life transition? And that's how I started the D&I program at Looker, because I wanted to help working women. I wanted them to have resources. I wanted them to know that, that they can be both a mother and a successful career person. And so, yeah, I mean, that moment was really hard, but it, like we say, those hard moments is where you grow the most. So,
yeah. So basically, you became an ally for future women and working
yeah.
mothers. And in your book, you talk about the importance of being an ally. Tell me about that. I think a lot of people think that they're allies, but they're not.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the definition of what it means to be an ally and how employees, leaders, coworkers can be allies for working parents, for people of different ethnicities, for everybody who shows up in their office.
Mm-hmm. Allyship is a verb. I mean, I think that's the easiest way to think about it. It's not an intent, it's action. And I think that if we want to show up as allies in the workplace, we need to proactively do things to help another person from their underrepresented background or identity. And so what can you do as a manager to help support? Can you be a mentor? Can you acknowledge when someone is being interrupted? Can you acknowledge when someone isn't being valued for their contributions? What are you doing? I think it requires us to do a lot of self-reflection on what are we doing actively to help somebody who may not have the same privileges that another person may have.
I love that. And you also talk about the importance of mentors, sponsors, champions, and finding your own if you're struggling, or maybe if you're not struggling, or looking to be a mentor or sponsor for somebody. I think, it's a topic that's discussed often. Not everybody is aware of what the difference is between a mentor and sponsor. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and how organizations can use mentorship and sponsorship programs? And should they have both within organizations to push forward diversity and belonging?
Yeah, I think they're critical, being a mentor and a sponsor. The difference is, a mentor is somebody that you might go to for advice. They may help you, with the questions you may have about your career. And so it's someone you go to help you with, making decisions around your career. A sponsor is somebody who is actively behind the scenes, really trying to advance your career. They're the person that is in meetings saying, hey, how do we get Debi onto this project? Or I think Debi needs, we need to look at Debi for the next promotion. Or there's a new opportunity at a different company. Let's think about Debi. That's sponsorship, where you're behind the scenes actually thinking about that person and how do you open doors and opportunities for them. Versus a mentor is somebody where, Debi, you would call somebody, who has more experience than you and get advice on how to handle a situation or, what a potential opportunity, the pros and cons. So they're different relationships. I think they're both important. I was very fortunate to have wonderful mentors and sponsors in my career. Interestingly, none of them were women or people of color. They were all white men. So allyship among our white men is critical, especially if you don't have anyone in your organization that is from your background. We need allyship. We need mentors that are looking beyond their scope to how can I help that up and coming person who may not naturally have created a mentor. How can I go and proactively seek them out and help them along their career journey?
There are a lot of HR leaders here with us today. What can they do to promote sponsorship within an organization? A lot of times, some of what we hear is, it's easy to put together a mentorship program where we're assigning people to one another, and the junior person can seek out assistance from the senior person. But sponsorships take there needs to be a personal connection. There needs to be some grooming of a relationship there. How do we give younger employees, junior employees, the skills to create the type of sponsorships that they're going to need throughout their career? What can HR leaders and managers do to cultivate those types of opportunities?
Well, one, I think, is education, right? I think we need to educate. And I know, Villyge has a lot of resources. So one is just, understanding what sponsorship looks like. I think a lot of managers, and I know HR leaders, spend a lot of time on leadership development. And I think leadership development should include sponsorship. What is it? What does it look like? What can you do? What things are important as a leader in your organization? So one is just, let's educate and train our managers so that they know what sponsorship looks like. Another important thing to do is either role model it or highlight when you see it. I think people learn from seeing others. I talk about in my book about the importance, not showing up authentically is not only important for you and your own sense of well-being and self-worth and mental health, but it also gives permission to others to do the same. Because you then see that person. And so when you see someone sponsoring somebody or mentoring somebody and see the value and the impact that's having on people, you as a manager might be more interested in doing that and following that. So I think role modeling it and highlighting it, and as part of either HR training or in part of company meetings. I think again, fostering, like, this is a good thing. This is how people are developing in their careers. And I think right now, especially with this hybrid work model, how are our young people getting mentored? Yeah. It is even harder now, because a lot of times, I know for myself, I was mentored by just walking down the hall, bumping into people, listening, how people manage difficult situations. All of that is lost. And so when you're remote, so I think it's even more important to, as a company and as a manager, to find ways to bring that back into, especially training our young people.
Absolutely. And I love how you made the suggestion to highlight that it's happening. So if there's an intranet, if there's an all hands on deck meeting, if there's a newsletter talking about, that relationship. And I think, naturally humans within workplaces are a bit competitive. So it might be like, I want to be highlighted as being a great sponsor and being a great leader. And it's also an opportunity for people who are already starting out in the leadership sphere to highlight to others that, their true leadership abilities. So I love that. I think that's a really fabulous suggestion. When we started, you were talking about the power of storytelling. And this is something that you also encourage leaders within organizations and HR leaders to make space for, is storytelling. Can you talk to us a little bit about your suggestions there and the connection between storytelling and organizational goals?
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of storytelling. I think that all of us in some way or another in our lives have felt like another. It may not be race, gender, sexual orientation. It may be, you grew up on food stamps. You didn't graduate college. You were adopted. There are a number of different ways where we feel like we're an other, and we have to change or adapt, who we are. And so I try to tap in. I think storytelling, what it does is it taps into that part of yourself of like, this is how it was hard for me, and it creates empathy for those around you. And so oftentimes we may work with a colleague for months or years and not know their story, not know what's happening at home in their lives. They may be dealing with, a medical issue or taking care of an elder parent. And once you start seeing the humanity of another person, seeing the challenges that they may be having on a day-to-day basis that you're not even aware of, it starts building empathy. You start realizing, we are multidimensional people. We're not, we don't come with just one dimension of the workplace. There's so much, like you said, behind us that is coming in. And how do we tap into that heart place and that empathy? And I think storytelling is one of those ways.
I love that. I mean, as you know, the Villyge platform allows employees to share with their managers, those stories that are happening in the background. But for, those of us out in the audience who don't have Villyge yet at their workplaces, I think just asking employees and making space at the beginning of meetings to relay some of that information. And you also talk and suggest about how leaders need to show up personally as well, and not just professionally, in order to model that. And as you said, though, it's a new workplace, with the new remote environment, there are so many challenges. We don't have the opportunity to grab a mentor as we're walking and grabbing a cup of coffee anymore. But when we have those virtual meetings on Zoom, by being leaders and modeling, this is what's going on in the background. My babysitter quit on me this week, or I'm struggling with, finding a new home for my mother, or whatever it is going on. Maybe it's something exciting. You got a puppy who's keeping you up all night. Whatever it is, I think it gives your employees and your team members permission. And I think old school thinking was that clutters up the workplace and hinders productivity. But what we've seen is that when we can see each other for the full person they are within the workplace, we're all going to give more, because we're no longer worried about just what we're working on, but we're worried about how to push forward the team. And is everyone getting what they need from me to be the best that they can? And then we increase not just personal productivity of all of our employees, but team productivity, and goals get pushed forward much further. There was a study recently published in Harvard Business Review talking about when managers personally care about their employees, productivity on average minimum is increased by 10% for all of those employees. In a downward market, who doesn't want more productivity from our employees? When we can't hire, an additional person, we don't have the resources there. By caring about our employees, 10 people on a team, everyone giving 10%, that's an extra team member right there, just from asking people to share their stories. So I love that. I so love that.
Yeah. And, I think going back to a point you made earlier about role modeling, one of the things I remember clearly at Looker, when I was at Looker, was we had a new member of the C-suite, and he joined the company, and he had negotiated this coming in, joined the company, and 1 week later took paternity leave. And he's like, my wife's having a baby. I'm going to stay at home and take paternity leave for the first 3 months. And I remember thinking, wow, I've never seen that. And first of all, men don't take paternity leave as often as they should. And him coming in and immediately taking paternity leave really gave permission to other female executives, all women in that organization, permission to say, yeah, this is important. Being this part in the journey of one's life is important. And so I really do encourage people to bring their whole selves to work, because that allows other people to feel a little less nervous about doing it themselves.
100%. And I think as organizations, we have to take a long-term view. So rather than seeing this man who, day 2, week 1, is already going out on 3 months, we're going to support you. This isn't going to be, a 1-year journey where you're starting with 3 months on vacation. This is, we support you, and we hired you for a reason. We want your talent. We see you. Okay, go for it. And we're going to support you. You, in your book, where you relate the story of that manager who, said, how could you do this to me, when you had one of the greatest moments in your personal life? You shared how you hung on for a few years, but perhaps, and we hear these stories all the time through Villyge and through experiences, we know that when employers and managers and leaders show up for employees during times of need, the loyalty is like none other. I mean, I've seen so many employees, when they have the backing of their manager through those personal experiences, they're going to be there for the long term.
100%. And I'm glad you raised that, Debbie. When because of my experience, when then I became a manager, was very cognizant of not repeating that. And I hired a woman in my organization, and she was so she had a child, she got pregnant while she was working for me, and she was going out on maternity leave. And we celebrated that she was going out on maternity leave. We made, we were so excited for this life event for her. She had originally asked for 3 months. After the 3 months, she called and said, I've got the 2 kids at home. I need 3 more months. And I said, look, we'll figure it out. Take your 3 months. So you have 6 months of maternity leave. I understand. She came back after those 6 months, was refreshed, was grateful, she has followed me from organization to organization after, because the loyalty, she just so appreciated, being seen, being supported, being valued during this, big transition in her life. It just came back to me tenfold. And, at the end of the day, we figure out when people go out on leave, we figure it out,
Yeah.
it's temporary,
Totally.
It's the long-term view that matters.
Yeah. And what I found interesting in that story is you said she followed you from company to company.
Yeah.
So great company paid the bill for 6 months of leave or whatever, but it was you that she followed. And we also have to remember it's you, manager, that employees leave. Statistics show that 49% of all employees have left jobs because of how their managers responded to them during a personal life event. And same thing, they'll leave or they'll stay. And as companies, we have to empower our managers to do what you did, and to allow people to show up as their authentic selves, all of it, whatever their identity is. It's so important.
And it doesn't have to be big.
No.
When I had another employee that worked at my last company, and she was dealing with her mom who was, going into elder care facility, and it was really hard, right? And a lot of the logistics landed on her. And it's literally just saying, take the time you need to figure it out. And when you're done, come back and we'll pick up. It's just a couple days or whatever it was, but giving your employee that space to deal with, things that require a lot of attention and a lot of emotion. And it came back again, just tenfold. And employees just want to feel, seen. They want to feel heard. They want to be valued. So, empathy is so important.
Yeah, at Villyge, we always say it's the untapped lever that businesses have yet to pull. So much emphasis for so many decades now has been placed on productivity, not realizing that, to drive productivity forward, we have to stop and we have to care. And as you said, it comes forward tenfold. The stories are again and again. Somebody on our team once had a personal situation, a very young employee. She wasn't married, didn't have kids, but she had a very serious boyfriend. And she was honest that her and her boyfriend were breaking up, and she was heartbroken and she needed to take a week off. And, I didn't say, oh, silly baby love or puppy love, you can get over it. I supported, I recognized it. And that 1 week off turned into 2 weeks. And then she came back and she was working nights and she was working weekends. And she used every opportunity to say, thank you for being there. Because what is the alternative? Are we going to replace the employee? Are we going to go out and look for somebody to train from scratch? And then from that person, that employee, we have to build up the relationship again. And then inevitably that employee most certainly will have stuff happening in the background for them too. Maybe it's not an elder care issue, maybe it's not a relationship issue, maybe it's something else, but this is life. And this is the world post-pandemic. I say it was also the world pre-pandemic, but we just hit it, which is why we're talking about all of the suggestions you have in this book.
Yes.
I
well,
love
and I think the pandemic accelerated all of this conversation too.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we have a window into everybody's life situation. Kids are running around, the dog is barking, the in-laws are here. It is. Yeah. So a lot of this empathy was actually created, and people, I think, have really, that conversation around the workplace is evolving. And I also think the next generation, they saw what maybe my generation went through, and they don't want any of that. They want balance, right? They want to be able to participate in their hobbies in addition to work. And so I think, as leaders, we need to acknowledge that there is a generational difference here. And if we don't address it, they've got choice. They've got data. They got more data than we ever had. And so they're very mobile.
Very mobile. I mean, today's the freelance economy is huge. The gig economy is huge. And employees are opting out if the culture is not right within the workplace. So it's challenging for HR leaders. It's challenging for managers today to cultivate that culture, especially when it's remote or hybrid, that is going to attract today's top talent. Not just to go off and start their own thing on their own, but to come and be part of a team. That's why, I mean, I love your book and I love the nuggets, how it's all about managers. I think managers have a really hard role today. So much pressure is placed on them. They are elevated to a leadership role oftentimes because they are phenomenal individual contributors, but they haven't been proven yet to lead teams, and they're hungry for the skills. What are, a few of the top things that you want managers, new leaders to realize and recognize about supporting their teams and their employees?
Yeah, a couple of different strategies that I think we talked about a little bit earlier, but notice in a meeting who's not speaking up. It's usually, there's usually people that tend to dominate the conversations, and then there's those that stay quiet. They've got nuggets. They've got, really great opinions and thoughts. And so that's what we talked about, instead of, singling them out and saying, how do we, what's the different, how can we do this differently? Let's get the different opinion in the room. So that's one strategy. Don't other your diverse employees also. I think it's for those that are from underrepresented identities. I've seen this many times where it's like, okay, we got to put up the D&I page. So, our Black and brown employees, let's get a picture. Well, that automatically others you, and you automatically feel not part of the company, but only seen for your particular race or gender. Step back. If you're part of the dominant culture, step back, give space to others that may be a little shy to coming into their own, or pass the mic, ask for people's opinions, try to draw them in. I think, again, there are people that tend to dominate conversations, and, how do we encourage those managers to kind of step back and let others, rise to the occasion? And sometimes you just need a little space for that.
Yes, 100%. What are your thoughts on ERGs? Do you feel that those are, a great place something that we should cultivate within our workplaces? Or do you feel that that's kind of forcing people into boxes too? Or is there a way to do both? And do we, encourage others to join the ERGs who might not be a part of the identity? Talk to me a little bit about ERGs, employee resource groups, or affinity groups.
Yeah, I think they're really important because it provides a space for people to gather who have similar lived experiences. Now, I don't think it needs to be forced upon somebody because, let's say, I'm Latina, do I have to be part of the Latinx ERG? It's up to me. And whether or not a Latinx ERG is going to be formed, really, I think it needs to come from the Latinx employees saying they want this. I think if companies go and start creating all the different ERGs and think, hey, here, we're creating this for you, and it's not being, it doesn't feel authentic to that particular group, then it'll be forced upon them, and I don't think it'll succeed. But for those ERGs that are driven by the employees, something that they care about, they want to gather, it's really a great place. It's a great place to find support. It's a great place to be validated. I know as a woman in leadership, it feels great to be around other female executives because we've shared similar experiences. So I don't feel like, I'm, my particular experience is not lonely. Other people have experienced the same thing. Also during events that are difficult. So I know, for example, rise of anti-Semitism or the anti-Asian movement that was happening. For people with that shared identity to be able to come together and just cry together and hold each other and, just, and when I say hold, I mean like hold space with each other, like be in a place where, yeah, this is really hard right now for me. You feel so seen and validated when you're around people that you don't have to explain why this is hard. They just know it.
Yeah. And it pushes forward community, and it provides
Yeah.
us with a sense of belonging to, which forms that connection to the company. Which as employers, as leaders, we want everyone to be glued in. Personally, professionally, we want everyone to care. It comes back to just caring. When leaders care about you, you're going to care more about the organization. So I agree. I think they're very important. You said something important though, it's not like you can just, leaders can sprinkle out there, here's an ERG for everybody. How can leaders and HR leaders in particular put out there that like, we welcome this, you just need to come forward? Maybe you yourself would not have done that so many years back, right?
Yeah.
So how do you make space for people to feel comfortable coming forward and saying, we want an ERG?
I think by being very proactive, saying this is something we value, that we will support, we'll put budget behind it and resources behind it. Oftentimes, the ones that are coming forward to work on DEI issues or ERGs already are the ones that might be struggling or, might be doing this on the side. And so this is like another layer of work. So if you can put resources towards it, budget towards it, and provide a framework also. One of the things that we did at Looker, which was great, was we had a leadership. We created kind of leadership roles within each ERG and a framework of, okay, as the leader, here's a framework you could use to lead your ERGs, how many meetings and events you can do. So it also helped build leadership skills for folks in a different way. So I think instead of somebody having to come into a company and raising their hand and saying it's something we can do, I think as leaders we can say this is something we value and support. And so if you are interested in creating an ERG, here's the budget, here's the resources, here's the framework that you have, and we're here to support you.
I love that. I think that's a terrific suggestion. I love that. What do you see as the greatest struggle for HR today in pushing forward the DEIB agenda?
I think the biggest struggle is everyone is at a different place on their journey around DEI. And one of the things I always say to leaders is there are a group of people that are saying we're going too fast, and there's a group of people that are saying we're not going fast enough. And you have to work with both groups to try to move things forward. And so and this is my own personal way on how I, move D&I initiatives forward. Everybody has a different perspective on it. So I'm not saying mine is better or right. But I do think that meeting people where they're at is going to be a better way to move people along on the journey. Because I think if you don't meet them where they're at, it's going to be met with a lot of resistance, and you're not going to move the needle at all. But that might be a little slow for some folks. So, I think it's managing both of those groups of people and how do we keep the conversation going? How do we continue to make it important? How to be intentional? That's the other thing. I think a lot of times we might aspire to do things, but we don't actually make concrete goals or intentions around it. And, at one company, we used, data and specifically looked at how many women do we have in the organization, how many people of color, what do we actually, what percentage do we want to change in the next 5 years? And in order to do that, that means we have to really look at our new hires and, we have to be very intentional. We have to go out and really be intentional about sourcing. And so, I think aspirational isn't going to move the needle, intention does.
I love that. Beyond numbers, beyond saying, we want to hit this percentage of women, what other measures can we look at to gauge advancement?
I think cultural surveys are great. Going around annually and surveying your employees and around specific things around belonging. How are they feeling with the organization, their managers? Do they feel like they can bring their whole self to work? I think there are a lot of great tools out there to gauge that. So yeah, I think that's a great tool.
I love it. I so love it. And then one other thing that you say in the book, which really resonated with me, is you said, when organizations make room for people to come to work as their whole selves, as someone from an immigrant family, as parents or caretakers, as someone who's LGBTQ plus, or who is Black or Latino or Asian, or so many other facets that make each of us who we really are, belonging, right? Do we belong? Those organizations not only gain the incredible benefits of diverse perspective, they also free those employees from the intense effort of hiding, so they can focus that energy on professional advancement and efforts. So I love that. And I think it's important for organizations to realize that this isn't just a fluffy, nice to do thing, that we have to gauge our advancement here and ensure that our employees are, do feel as if they belong, so that way they're showing up as their best selves, so they can deliver what the organization needs. We all want to live in this kumbaya world, but at the same time, when we're talking about organizations, it's the bottom line. And there's a huge connection between, instilling that belonging in an organization and improving the bottom line. There's higher rates of innovation, higher profitability. I mean, all of the stats are out there that this is so important, and it's really tangible.
Yeah. And, a lot of my book, I talk about hiding. And there's code switching, which is a term of, switching our mannerisms or the way we show up, depending on the situation that you're in. And I find it fascinating, and as I'm going around talking about my book, because those people that have had to hide something about themselves, they get it immediately. I mean, immediately they talk about how exhausting it is, how difficult it is, how they had to change their hairstyle, their mannerisms, their dress, their everything, and how just mentally, physically exhausting all of that was. But if you never had to really change who you are and you just kind of show up, which is wonderful. I think that's wonderful. I'm really happy for those people. They don't really understand it as much, because well, why don't you just show up? Just show up as you. And what I'm trying to talk to people about is that it's easy to say just show up as you if you haven't had years, decades of external messages saying who you are isn't good enough. Whether it's by culture or media or peers or friends, if you've been hearing your whole life that who you are, your identity isn't good enough, you hide it, because everybody wants to belong, right? We all want to fit in, right? So you start adapting who you are, start downplaying these little things so that you can belong. And I think that's what we have to untap. And the message of my book is, the work that we do as individuals to believe in our self-worth, to unpack some of those messages. I know I internalized it, growing up in California with a large Latino population. I sat in more rooms than I can tell you of people saying derogatory comments about Latinos and, Mexico and the wall and all these things. And I've internalized it. And so I have to unpack that. I have to know that, I'm worthy, I'm enough. And And so, I think that piece I'm trying to explain through this book.
Yeah,
Try to create that empathy.
I love it. I get it. I've experienced it as a woman. I've
Mhm.
experienced it as a Jew in the workplace. 100% get it. We only have 10 minutes left here, and I
Yeah.
want to open it up to the audience. If anybody has questions for Tricia, please throw them in the chat as we're finishing up. And again, I really want to encourage everybody to buy this book. It's a great read. She's a great writer. There's some phenomenal stories in here, lots and lots of stories, and so many takeaways. I just love it. Tricia, as we finish up here, what do you want the audience to know? Is there anything that we haven't discussed that you really want to convey?
Yeah, I think for the person who may feel like they're an other, and who has been trying to change or adapt who they are to fit in, for them, I say, belonging begins with self-acceptance, and it begins with, knowing that you are enough, exactly how you are, and that you deserve to be cherished, exactly as you are. And my book, its goal is to take the reader on that journey so that by the end of the book, they will know and feel valued for exactly who they are. And I think if you're a manager that's looking to create an inclusive environment, go on these journeys, be curious, right? I think curiosity is important. I know that this is a hard conversation. Anything with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion is hard. We don't want to get it wrong. We don't want to say the wrong thing. And I can tell you one of the benefits I had actually living in both spaces is that I kind of have a viewpoint in both spaces. And what I can tell you is people from underrepresented communities, they don't care if you get it wrong, if you just own it. I got it wrong. I said the wrong thing. I messed up. Help me learn. Talk to me how I could be better. That's the answer when you get it wrong, is take accountability for it. Help me be better. What resources can I read? Where can I learn more? So I just challenge all leaders to be curious and do your own work. Because I think all of us that are others, we've been doing our work. We're doing all the work, and we're holding all the space, and we're doing all the things. And so I think everybody kind of going along on this journey would really benefit us all.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. This is all so meaningful to me. At Villyge, our mission is bringing humanity into the workplace so everyone can show up as their most authentic self. We realize that as employees are going through life events, personally, they do affect everybody professionally in the workplace. So I really took a lot out of your book. I loved it. I'm going to share here for everybody. And where can they get the book if they're interested?
You can go to my website, triciatimm.com. That's TRICIATIMM with 2 M's. There's a number of different links there, but it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, IndieBound, anywhere online retailers where books are sold.
Awesome. And it's not out yet, right? When does it release?
No, it's out on March 7th. So we're a couple months away, but you're able to pre-order it now, so you can get your hands on it right away on March 7th when it's available.
Awesome. One question that would from the audience, Tricia, how do you inspire softness and acceptance within our own hierarchy, specifically down up?
I think as leaders, showing vulnerability. I think a lot of times, and I remember learning from my mom, like, show that you have it all together, show that, nothing breaks you. And I think that the consequence of that is everyone below you thinks they've got to have it all together, that they don't make mistakes. And we all make mistakes. We're human and we mess up. And I think that as leaders, if we can show vulnerability and talk about the mistakes we've made, talk about the challenges we're facing in the workplace or in life, that will start softening and creating psychological safety within your group or your organization.
Thank you. Well, Tricia, thank you so much. It has been a true pleasure speaking with you. I enjoyed your book very much, and I'm excited for it to get in the hands of employees and leaders. There's something in this for everybody. So thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon, everybody. And
Okay.
thank you for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.